The broken promise. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Cathedral, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floors. Sophia Blake stood before the ornate mirror in the bridal suite, her fingers trembling. As she adjusted her grandmother's pearl necklace one final time, the ivory silk gown hugged her curves perfectly, its delicate lace detailing catching the light with each nervous breath she took. At 26, Sophia had always believed in fairy tale endings. Her dark brown hair was swept into an elegant updo. Small white roses tucked between the curls, and her green eyes sparkled with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She was about to marry David Mitchell, the man she had loved for 3 years. "You look absolutely stunning," her best friend Rachel whispered, dabbing at her own eyes with a tissue. "David is the luckiest man alive." Sophia smiled, though something deep in her stomach felt unsettled. David had seemed distant the past few weeks, claiming work stress was consuming him. He worked at his father's law firm and had been trying to make partner for months. She had dismissed her concerns, attributing them to pre-wedding nerves that everyone assured her were completely normal. "Has anyone heard from David this morning?" Sophia asked, glancing at the clock on the wall. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. Tradition dictated they shouldn't see each other until she walked down the aisle. Rachel exchanged a worried glance with Sophia's sister Emma. "I'm sure he's just getting ready with his groomsmen," Rachel said quickly. "You know how men are about timing." But as the minutes ticked by, an uncomfortable silence settled over the bridal suite. Emma stepped outside to check with the wedding coordinator, her heels clicking against the marble floors of the cathedral hallway. When she returned, her face was pale. "Sophia," Emma said gently, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk." "What?" The tone in her sister's voice made Sophia's heart skip. "What's wrong? Where's David?" Emma sat beside her on the velvet bench, taking her hands. "David isn't here. His best man just told the coordinator that he received a text message this morning. David said he couldn't go through with the wedding." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. The room seemed to spin around her as she struggled to process what she was hearing. "What do you mean he can't go through with it? We sent out 200 invitations. Everyone's here." "What did the message say?" Rachel moved to Sophia's other side, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. The exact words were, "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I need time to think. That's all." Sophia felt tears welling in her eyes, threatening to ruin the makeup that had taken hours to perfect. Her dream wedding, the day she had planned for months, was crumbling around her. All those people sitting in the cathedral pews, waiting to witness what they thought would be a celebration of love. "I have to tell everyone to go home," Sophia whispered, her voice breaking. "How do I face them? How do I explain that the groom just decided he didn't want to marry me?" Before anyone could respond, there was a firm knock on the door. Emma opened it to reveal a tall man in an impeccably tailored black suit. He had striking blue eyes and dark hair that was slightly tousled, as if he had been running his hands through it. Sophia had never seen him before, but there was something commanding about his presence that filled the small room. "Excuse me," the stranger said, his voice deep and confident. "I'm looking for Sophia Blake." "I'm Sophia," she managed, wiping away the tears that had begun to fall. "Who are you?" The man stepped into the room, and Sophia noticed how he carried himself with quiet authority. He was probably in his early 30s, with the kind of refined appearance that suggested success and sophistication. "My name is James Crawford," he said, his intense gaze focused entirely on her. "I own Crawford Industries. I was invited to the wedding by David's father, who handles some of my legal work." Sophia stared at him, confused about why this stranger was in her bridal suite during the worst moment of her life. "I don't understand. What do you want?" James moved closer, his expression serious but not unkind. "I overheard the conversation in the hallway. I know what happened with David, and I have a proposition for you." Rachel stood protectively beside Sophia. "I think you should leave. This isn't the time for business discussions." James never took his eyes off Sophia. "Shh, you have 200 guests sitting in that cathedral? You've planned what I'm sure is a beautiful ceremony? Your wedding dress is exquisite, and you look absolutely radiant. Your point being?" Emma asked sharply. My point is that it would be a shame to let David's cowardice ruin what should be a celebration, James said calmly. I'm offering to take his place. The room fell completely silent. Sophia stared at James, certain she had misheard him. Excuse me. Marry me instead, James said simply, as if he were discussing the weather. I know it sounds unconventional, but hear me out. You won't have to face the humiliation of sending everyone home. Your family won't have to endure the embarrassment. And you'll still have your wedding day. Sophia stood up abruptly, her silk skirts rustling around her. Are you insane? Why would you want to marry a complete stranger? Flickered in James's eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite identify. Perhaps I have my reasons. What matters is that I'm offering you a solution to an impossible situation. This is ridiculous, Rachel interjected. Sophia, don't listen to him. But Sophia found herself unable to look away from James's face. There was something about him that commanded attention, a quiet strength that was both intimidating and strangely comforting. What would you get out of this arrangement? She asked, her practical side kicking in despite the surreal nature of the conversation. That's my concern, James replied. What I'm offering you is a way to salvage your dignity and give. Your family and friends, the celebration they came here to witness. Sophia's mind raced. Outside, 200 people were waiting for a wedding. Her parents had spent a fortune on the reception. Her grandmother had flown in from Ireland. The photographer was probably wondering why the ceremony hadn't started. Is insane, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Sometimes the most insane decisions are the most liberating ones, James said quietly. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me, Sophia. I'm simply offering you a choice that doesn't involve public humiliation. Emma stepped forward. Sophia, you can't seriously be considering this. But as Sophia looked at James Crawford, something in her chest shifted. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was defiance, or maybe it was just the refusal to let David Mitchell ruin what was supposed to be the most important day of her life. If I agreed to this insanity, she said slowly, what would you expect from me? Nothing that you're not willing to give, James replied, his voice gentle but firm. We would be married in name, but anything beyond that would be entirely your choice. The wedding march began to play faintly through the cathedral walls, the signal that the ceremony should be beginning. Time was running out. Sophia had to make a decision that would change her life forever. She looked at James Crawford, this mysterious stranger who had appeared at her lowest moment like some kind of guardian angel in an expensive suit. There was something in his eyes, a sincerity that made her believe he wasn't trying to take advantage of her situation. Okay, she said, the word coming out stronger than she felt. Let's do it. A new beginning. The walk down the aisle felt like the longest journey of Sophia's life. Every step on the rose-petal-covered runner brought whispers and confused murmurs from the guests. She could feel their eyes on her, some filled with sympathy, others with curiosity about the tall stranger waiting for her at the altar instead of David Mitchell. James stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, watching her approach with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. He had somehow managed to find a white boutonniere in the few minutes since their conversation, and he wore it with the same confidence he seemed to carry in everything else. Father McKenna, the elderly priest who had known Sophia since childhood, looked bewildered but was too professional to halt the ceremony. As she reached the altar, James extended his hand to her, and she was surprised by how warm and steady his touch felt. Dearly beloved Father McKenna began, his voice carrying across the cathedral, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Sophia Blake, and he paused, clearly uncertain. James Crawford, James supplied quietly, his voice strong enough for the front rows to hear. The priest nodded and continued with the traditional ceremony. Sophia found herself studying James's profile as the familiar words washed over them. He had a strong jawline and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he knew how to find joy in life. There was something distinguished about him that went beyond his obviously expensive clothing. When it came time for the vows, James turned to face her fully. I know these aren't the circumstances either of us planned, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I promise to honor and respect you. Whatever this becomes, you'll never have cause to regret this decision. Sophia felt. Tears pricking her eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation or heartbreak. "I promise to be honest with you," she replied softly, "and to try to understand why you've done this incredibly generous thing." Father McKenna produced the rings, and Sophia realized with a start that she still wore David's engagement ring. Without hesitation, she slipped it off and handed it to Emma, who was standing as her maid of honor with tears streaming down her face. James reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a simple platinum band. "I hope this fits," he murmured, sliding it onto her finger. It was slightly loose but stayed in place, and Sophia was touched by the thoughtfulness of his preparation. She took the matching band from Father McKenna and placed it on James's finger, surprised by how right it felt to be making this gesture with him instead of David. "You may kiss the bride," Father McKenna announced. Though his expression suggested he still wasn't entirely sure what was happening, James cupped Sophia's face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears she didn't realize had fallen. "May I?" "Duh," he asked quietly, and she nodded, unable to find her voice. The kiss was soft and brief, nothing more than a gentle press of lips, but Sophia felt something spark between them. When they broke apart, James kept his hands on her face for just a moment longer, his blue eyes searching hers. The cathedral erupted in applause, though it was mixed with continued murmurs of confusion. As they turned to face their guests, James tucked Sophia's hand into the crook of his arm, and they walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife. The reception that followed was surreal. Sophia's parents, though clearly shaken by the turn of events, were gracious hosts who welcomed James into their family with the kind of politeness that masked their bewilderment. Many of the guests seemed more interested in the dramatic story than the actual celebration. But James handled every introduction and conversation with such charm and ease that soon the mood lifted considerably. During the first dance, James proved to be an accomplished dancer, guiding Sophia around the floor with confidence. "You're handling this remarkably well," he said as they swayed to the music. "I'm still in shock, I think," Sophia admitted. "Part of me keeps waiting to wake up from this very strange dream." "It's not a dream," James said, spinning her gently, "though I understand if it feels surreal. This morning, neither of us expected to be married to a stranger." As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself genuinely enjoying James's company. He was intelligent and well-spoken, with a dry sense of humor that emerged as he relaxed. He seemed to know something about every topic that came up in conversation, from art to travel to business, but he never came across as pretentious or condescending. "Tell me something about yourself that isn't business-related," Sophia said. During a quiet moment, as they sat together at the head table, James considered the question seriously. "I restore vintage motorcycles in my spare time. I have a 1947 Indian Chief that I've been working on for 3 years. It's probably the most impractical hobby for someone who wears suits to work every day, but there's something therapeutic about working with my hands." The confession surprised and delighted her. "That's wonderfully unexpected. I paint in my spare time. Watercolors, mostly landscapes. I've never had the courage to show them to anyone. I'd like to see them sometime," James said, and Sophia could tell he meant it. As the reception wound down and guests began to leave, Sophia felt a surge of panic. What happened now? Where would they go? What had she gotten herself into? James seemed to sense her anxiety. "I've booked you a suite at the Ritz-Carlton for tonight," he said quietly. "Just you? I'll stay at my apartment. We can figure out the practical details tomorrow." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, giving her space and time to process everything that had happened, touched her deeply. "James, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done today. You saved me from complete humiliation." "You don't need to thank me, Sophia. If anything, I should be thanking you." She looked at him curiously. "For what?" James was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "For giving me something I didn't realize I was looking for." Before she could ask what he meant, Emma appeared to help her change out of her wedding dress. As James said goodbye, he took her hand and pressed something into her palm. It was a key. "To my apartment," he explained. "When you're ready to talk about what comes next, whenever that is, you're welcome there. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people figuring out an unusual situation." That night, alone in the luxurious hotel suite, Sophia sat by the window in her silk pajamas, looking out at the city lights and turning the key over in her hands. Her wedding day had been nothing like she had imagined, but as she reflected on the events, she realized she felt something she hadn't expected: hope. James Crawford was a mystery, but he was a kind and honorable mystery. He had stepped in during her darkest moment and offered her dignity when she thought she had lost everything. Whatever his motivations, whatever came next, Sophia knew that today had marked the beginning of something entirely new in her life. As she drifted off to sleep, she found herself curious about the man she had married, about his vintage motorcycles, and his reasons for making such an extraordinary gesture. For the first time since David had abandoned her at the altar, Sophia Blake Crawford smiled genuinely, wondering what tomorrow would bring in this unexpected new chapter of her life.